wherever you may be, however you may be listening. Thank you so much for tuning in to another edition of the All Cardinals podcast. My name is Donnie Druin, joined every week by my main man, Kevin Hicks. Before we get into all the nitty gritty, go and follow our work at allcardinals.com or sla.com/NFL/Cardinals. Follow Kevin on the app formerly known as Twitter at khicks_21. Follow me at Donnie Druin with an IE in the Donnie. Kevin, week 7 is already here, my man. The team is traveling up north to Seattle, a place where no backup Cardinals quarterback has ever done anything crazy and pulled a game out of their ass. But we'll get into that here in a little bit. Bro, basketball season is here. You and I are both very busy with Suns coverage. We're really excited to get into that. But before we get into everything else, how are you?
Doing good, man. It's an exciting time for sports in the Valley. We got the Cardinals aren't having too much success in the win column, but they're still encouraging. They've been competitive in every game they played virtually. The Sun season's about to start, like you said. Very, very hyped for that. Should be a fun season there. D-backs are doing very well, and ASU football is looking like they're on the upward trajectory as well, along with the Cardinals. And it's exciting. Let's see what we do.
Bro, hockey season's here for the Yotes. The D-back got a very, very big win last night against the Phillies, man. I think for the first time in a while, if you're just an overall Valley sports fan, like you kind of feel good about where you're at right now, right?
Yeah. Even with the guys that run ASU's athletics program, it still feels good there. Go Devils. The game tomorrow night might be tough, but
Washington's you know what, man? It is what it is whenever it comes to Washington, right? I mean, ASU is very much in a rebuilding stage, so much like the Arizona Cardinals, who were also in the rebuilding stage, but they did get very, very good news this week when both Budda Baker and Kyler Murray were designated to return from the respective injury list. Both of them had a 21-day practice window open up for them. Kyler Murray may be a little far-fetched to play this week or even next week too. Budda Baker, who is a Washington native, making a very, very big push to play. He spoke with reporters earlier this week, and he labeled himself a game-time decision. And obviously, the guy wants to go back home and play in front of his home crowd. He told us in the media that it was initially a 6-week injury. So for him to come back in 4 weeks, I mean, I know we are so used to Budda Baker making incredible things happen on the field, but just in terms of how he's what's the right word? I guess like attacked his recovery from the knee injury, where it could have kept him out for almost 2 months. For him to come back in such a short time frame just leaves me speechless, man.
Budda's as tough as they come. Last year, when the season was out of reach, he suffered that high ankle sprain late in the season, and I believe he only sat out the last game of the season, if I'm not mistaken.
I think he might have sat out the last two.
But he was still playing through that, and that's an injury that could take 2 months to recover from as well. Like if anybody that watched Hard Knocks and wasn't familiar with him before, they know that he's so passionate about the game, so passionate about his team. He'll go the extra mile to compete even through tough circumstances. So it's not surprising to me. I don't think it's surprising to you either, but it's crazy how much he loves the game and the Cardinals.
And I think that's one of the selling points if you're a Cardinals fan. They reworked his contract this past offseason before training camp. They made sure he stayed amid a bunch of trade rumors and speculation throughout the offseason. I mean, we're talking about a guy who either broke it or separated his shoulder in the game last year on one of the first plays of the games and finished the game. And I think he was up there in terms of leading the Cardinals in terms of tackle numbers. There is not a whole lot of great things to boast about here in Arizona, at least in terms of Cardinals football, but Budda Baker, definitely one of them. And then he, like we said, game time decision for Sunday. That's what he officially labeled himself. We will see if that actually happens. But Kevin, they're going up north to face a Seattle Seahawks team for the first time in 2023, a 3-2 record on the year. The numbers on the box scores don't exactly pop out. They don't look like a perennial Super Bowl contender, but they're a good football team, and they are a pretty good football team up north. Geno Smith obviously leading the way for Seattle's offense. We can actually get into the numbers right now for them. Kenneth Walker in the backfield, one of the better young runners in the league. Then, of course, you have that receiving core with DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. It is notable that DK Metcalf has not practiced the first 2 days of the week. We've yet to see the injury report for today on Friday, but regardless for not, still a lot of weapons for Seattle's offense. And when you try to compare them to the Cardinals defense, who statistically has not been all there. You
Mhm.
really have to not be worried, but I would be a little cautious just in terms of getting your hopes up to stop Gino and company on Sunday.
Yeah, I agree, and I also saw earlier there was a tweet out or whatever we call it now, that Zaven wasn't seen at practice in the early stages of practice, and a couple other of the edge rushers. So that's something to look out for as well, because although there hasn't been one dominant edge rusher, the collection of talent that's there has definitely flashed throughout the season so far, especially Gardecki. We all, you know how
Oh
much
yeah,
I love Gardecki. Like he's just a guy that whole team can rally around, and he plays hard every single rep. Uh, but I still think that this defense has played better than the numbers might indicate, especially that performance against Dallas. That was an extremely impressive showing against them. Even though they haven't looked great the last month or so, that's the only game they've really been beat down in other than the San Fran game. So I think the defense with what Rallis and Gannon have been given has performed pretty well. And honestly, the Seahawks are coming off of a rough offensive showing. Gino had a really rough game against Cincinnati last week. That was the game that I was focusing on mostly in the early slate last weekend. He had two chances to win the game, and he totally sold the bag. That was not a pretty game for him or Burrow, but I still like Seattle's offense. Kenneth Walker, like you mentioned, he's very, very good. Even if DK doesn't play, Lockett and JSN will get their chances. And we know very well that Lockett is sort of a kryptonite for the
Cardinals
Cardinals.
killer, man. Yeah, for whatever reason, he always managed to have a
Yeah,
great game against the Cardinals secondary, who might not have Jalen Thompson either. Jalen Thompson hasn't practiced all week. He did miss last week as well. So the Cardinals again could be without their starting safety duo up north when they travel to Seattle. And then you looked at the numbers right here. The Seahawks do two things very, very well, which are important to winning. They score a lot of points, almost 25 per game, which is eighth in the NFL. And then they've only turned the ball over 3 times. That's when you talk about a winning formula on the offensive side of the ball, they're not the most flashy offense, not putting up crazy numbers like the Miami Dolphins, but at the end of the day, they do get the job done whenever needed. And I do like the point that you brought up too, because maybe the Cardinals defense is playing a little bit better than the numbers show. It's not like the offense has helped them a whole lot throughout the last couple of weeks too. I know they've been on the field a lot defensively too, and missing Buda Baker, missing Jalen Thompson, the entire secondary situation and how that is. I am hoping Garrett Williams can come back and just inject a new life into this cornerback room because it desperately needs it. Marco Wilson has not played up to his standards so far. And Keichel Clark is kind of reverting back to the reason why he was a day 3 pick to begin with. There's just a whole lot of variables at play here with the Cardinals defense. But I mean, you have guys like Kaiser White in the middle. You have guys like Dennis Gardeck coming off the edge. The Cardinals do a really, really good job of rotating their front sevens to make sure everybody's fresh, everybody stays, on their nails and toes. How confident are you that they can hold Seattle to 21?
I think
I think
truthfully, I
that's
could.
asking a lot.
It is asking a lot, but I could see a scenario in which it's that kind of 16-13 gritty game that we saw a couple years ago at Colt coming in and Kyler's absence and just managing the game and keeping Russ off the field. I believe that was Russ's last year in Seattle. I think it was 2021 when they won that game in Seattle. Like I said, Gino has been up and down this year a little bit. He's still showing that he's a starting level quarterback, which I don't think anybody expected going into last year, but his inconsistencies and the possible absence of DK probably make it easier on the Cardinals defense. I'd still say Seattle probably ends up scoring 24 around their average for the season, but I'd be surprised if they have an offensive explosion go for 30 plus. I think that it'll be kind of a 24-17, 24-20 kind of game.
Yeah, and the one thing that does worry me is that the Cardinals the last couple weeks have preached on trying to eliminate the best weapon. I know it's a very very tough thing to do, but I mean, you look at defensive masterminds throughout the years, and Bill Belichick is the first name that comes to mind. Whereas if you can take away the thing that you do best, how are you going to beat us, right? But the last couple of weeks, whenever it's Christian McCaffrey, whether it is Puka or like Cooper Cup. Sorry, not Puka. Puka was kind of locked down low key. Cooper Cup last week it had a big week. It just feels like the top weapon, Jamar Chase with Cincinnati too. Whoever the main option is, they're just having a giant day against the Cardinals. And I mean, if it's DK, it's DK. If it's Tyler Lockett, it's Tyler Lockett. If it's Kenneth Gainwell, if it's Kenneth Gainwell. There's a handful of guys who can really have themselves today against the Cardinals defense who just has not been up to par lately.
Yeah, it's a challenge because Seattle, like you said, their offense doesn't really pop off the charts, but they still have a lot of playmakers on the outside. They have Walker, they have Charbonnet, they have a solid running back rotation. Their line is pretty solid. It's just an offense that kind of is just solid all around. It's not like you said, it's not the Dolphins that were Mostert and a chain are averaging 10 yards a carry. Tyreek is breaking off 50-yard touchdowns every week. It's not like that, but they're an efficient, free-flowing offense, and that's the challenge, especially since they're a division rival. You get to see them again. They're not going to give you all their looks. They're just going to give you some of them this weekend. You got to be ready for whatever they throw at you because they can
Right.
throw a
And I,
lot.
I know it's a divisional game, and there's always that familiarity, which plays a big impact into that too. But I mean, we're talking about a brand new coaching staff, so it's not like these guys like really, really know each other's
Mhm.
tendencies, kind of like many other division rivalries in the NFL do. But I mean, nonetheless, it's an NFC West game. We have come to expect the unexpected, especially whenever these two teams meet for whatever reason. But I think Kaiser White, regardless of if Buda Baker plays or not, will again anchor the defense. The ability to stop the run has been a very big problem for the Cardinals defense the last couple of weeks. I'm not sure if they just need a couple more playmakers in the trenches. I'm not sure if it's just the talent of running backs, but I mean, Kenneth Walker, we've already kind of touched on him, a very, very talented runner. If DK can't go, I know the excuse me, I know the Seahawks offensive line is a little bit banged up this week too. But Kenneth Walker might see 25 to 30 carries a game. That's probably not a good thing if you're the Cardinals defense.
No, it's not. And going into the season, you know how much I was had reservations on the Cardinals D line as it was with LJ Collier and Jonathan Ledbetter, guys that really haven't proven anything in the NFL, being your headliners up front. And those guys are banged up now too. So you're really even more thin than you were to begin with. Because honestly, the first couple weeks of the season when they were healthy, the D line was actually performing pretty well. Their gap integrity was really strong. They were limiting explosive plays. They were actually contributing to getting the offense back on the field. But injury or not, once you start running into guys like Christian McCaffrey, once you start running into guys like Walker, once you start running into guys like Bijan
Joe
Robinson in
Mixon,
3 weeks, like it's just there's only so much you can do with the talent you have, and that is a concern, no doubt about it.
Yeah, then flipping over to the offensive side for Arizona, it feels like just a couple weeks ago we were talking about Josh Dobbs as a guy who was really making himself some money and really kind of cementing his status as either a solidified backup to Kyler whenever he returned, or maybe even potentially finding a bridge job somewhere else. The last 2 weeks, Kevin, Josh Dobbs has kind of regressed to what everybody had expected out of Josh Dobbs whenever he first got here to the desert, which is just a guy who does not look like he belongs as a starter in the NFL. It's been extremely tough sledding for Dobbs and company. He's turning the ball over. He's not progressing through reads, and he just looked like a shell of the quarterback we saw from weeks like 2 to 4. Now, granted, they're going against the Seahawks defense, which is pretty middle of the road. So if there is a quote unquote like bounce back game for Josh Dobbs, especially with Kyler Murray kind of lurking in the rearview mirror behind him, he knows it's put up or shut up time for him now. This might be the game. And then, kind of like we hinted a little bit earlier, Cardinals kind of know a thing or two about backups going up to Seattle, working their magic, and coming away with a win, right? Josh Dobbs is very capable of that. And even, I will say, last week when he wasn't able to pass the ball very efficiently, he did manage to pick up a decent amount of yards. I think he was their leading rusher last week with James Conner out. So Dobbs can certainly get it done with his legs. But I mean, when you look at the Seahawks defense, certainly a handful of names. Jamal Adams is back and healthy. I think the Cardinals can put up some points on these guys. I'm not saying they're going to drop a 30 burger on them, but I mean, this Seahawks defense is not the Legion of Boom. They don't necessarily jump off the page. They're a good but not great defense, but I still think the Cardinals, even without James Conner, have weapons that can possibly do damage against them.
I agree with that. I think Seattle does have quite a bit of talent on defense, and I really look out for Witherspoon and Tariq Woolen on the edges. Uh, we've seen the last couple of weeks that Dobbs has kind of been baited by various corners, and he's made some errant throws and turned the ball over in that fashion. But Seattle doesn't really have a guy that can pressure the line of scrimmage like Aaron Donald. Obviously, I mean, Aaron Donald's just generational, but they don't really have that kind of guy right now. And I think that's something that is advantage Cardinals, even without James Conner. Dobbs' ability to run the ball. Hopefully, you can get DeMarcado or Keontae involved, and they can be more effective than they were last week. Hollywood, Michael Wilson, Ertz or McBride, those are all guys that you can attack. I feel like Ertz is going to be a key piece in the game if you want to win the game because he's notably very good at picking his spots in the field, getting open and getting you those chunk 5-6 yard gains. I think that you're going to have to move the ball methodically to really put up points in this game, and that's what I think, honestly.
Yeah, touching on the Zach Ertz kind of thing, he's definitely been, I don't want to say a letdown, but he has not been the name brand Zach Ertz we've been used to seeing the last couple of weeks. We got on Dobbs a little bit earlier this season for not being able to hit Ertz down the field. Zach Ertz has done himself no favors at all by dropping numerous opportunities. Last week in Week 6 against the Rams, he was outsnapped by Trey McBride for the first time all year. Are we seeing the emergence of Trey McBride? Possibly. Me and Richie talked about this on the podcast we did yesterday on whether or not we would take a trade offer for guys like Marquise Brown and Zach Ertz. And kind of the consensus was, hey, if you can get something decent of value for Zach Ertz, you absolutely ship him away. His contract isn't necessarily team friendly. He's only getting older by the day. He's not really proving his worth, at least financially, on the field. You do have Trey McBride, who is starting to pick up the slack a little bit. He's starting to find his footing a little bit in Arizona's offense. But I really, really also like the point you brought up with the guys on the boundary, especially Tariq Woolen. I mean, for a guy that big to move that fast, absolutely crazy. The Cardinals already don't have a ton of receiving options. I know we really like Marquise, we really like Michael Wilson. Rondo Moore has been hit or miss just in terms of him being effective. Zach Pascal is kind of a big dude. Greg Dortch is extremely productive, but he has not seen the field at all in 2023. So, I mean, it'll be really interesting to see if Dobbs can work back towards Michael Wilson as like a second read, or I'm just so curious to see what this game plan is for them.
Yeah, I really hope that Dobbs starts getting back to Michael Wilson because when he started utilizing him in the San Fran game, man, that was tough. That
Well,
was so fun to watch the connection.
even in the Rams game, I mean, he was targeted very early, and like, okay, like they're going to make an effort to get Michael Wilson the ball early. This is good. This is something that needs to happen. And he didn't see another target until late in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, it's crazy. He's averaging 18 yards a catch this season. He only has 18 catches, but he's over 300 yards. That's
nuts.
Extremely good production, especially for a third round pick that a lot of draft pundits considered a reach at that point in the draft.
Yeah.
But going back, you could see in college how good he was at creating separation, how physically gifted he was. And he has good hands, honestly, too. He's looking right now, honestly, like one of the best receivers in this class because so far this class looks pretty disappointing. He's certainly at the top of most productive from the wide receiver class. And I still think he has a lot of upside. He has a lot of room to grow into a wide receiver 2 role, maybe even 1, who knows.
Well, the good news for Dobbs and company is that they are going against the Seahawks defense that isn't exactly known for taking the ball away. They've only have 7 turnovers on the year, which ranks at 19th. Their points per game, middle of the road. Their yards per game, middle of the road. Good, but not great. Like I said earlier, I'm not overly concerned. I know you had brought up they do have a handful of names on defense. That's certainly true. And then Jamal Adams kind of getting his feet wet again. We'll see what kind of damage he can do, especially in the run game. You brought up guys like Keontae Ingram, you brought up guys like Amari DiMercado. I would also keep an eye out on Damian Williams, too. Damian Williams signed to the practice squad a couple weeks ago. He did get a little run last week in LA. He didn't look terrible. I actually wouldn't be surprised if he ended up leading the Cardinals in carries this week if they end up going with a hot hand, because for my money, he looked better than Keontae Ingram and Amari DiMercado last week.
Yeah, that's fair. I wouldn't be surprised either. Um, Honestly, who are you leaning towards getting the start this week? Because I really don't know.
I don't know either. I knew for not a fact, but I mean, it's so funny because when James Conner went out and Amari filled in the rest of the way for him, everybody in the fantasy football world was like, "Hey, you need to go pick up Amari DiMercado." And I'm kind of putting the pieces to the puzzle together, and I put the probably 2 articles out where it's like, "Hey, if Keontae is healthy, Keontae is at least going to get the start. He's going to be the guy to start out the game." Lo and behold, it was Ingram that ended up getting the start out there. Did lead everybody in carries and touches, I believe. This week, I don't know because Keontae, not that he looked bad, but I don't think he like stood out. But neither did Amari, and neither did Damian Williams. But I mean, for my money, Williams was the most bang for your buck in that backfield. It's probably going to be another committee approach. If I'm a betting man, I probably go Keontae Ingram to get the start again. But I don't really think that means a whole lot when you're going to have 2 other running backs kind of feeding into your touches as well.
Yeah, and you also can throw in Rondell Moore. We've seen that.
They're
Yeah,
using him more frequently in that kind of backfield role. Yeah.
because I think a lot of defenses are still focusing on the game tape he had under Cliff, where he was used in a lot of bubble screen action and behind the line of scrimmage work. But people aren't prepared for him to run the ball out of the backfield, which is like that's crazy to me because if you know Rondell Moore, you know that his best trait is that he's an absolute burner. He just he can go 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. It's crazy how athletic he is. But I hope that they mix him in some of the shotgun packages. He gets some running action.
Yeah, the big thing around Rondell is that he's always been kind of looked at as like a gadget kind of guy. I know the Cardinals don't have a whole lot of like height in the wide receiver room. It's still puzzling to me because I feel like every time they've like pushed the ball deep downfield to Rondell, this is going back to the Cliff Kingsbury era. He's made plays, right? You can teach a lot of things. You can teach technique, you teach leverage, you can teach schemes. You can't teach speed, right? You either have it or you don't, especially at the NFL level. Rondell is fast. Rondell, it makes fast look not fast, right? I just want to see them take a couple shots down deep with him. And I know he's not a jump ball guy. He's not going to go up and get it from any corner or any safety. But I mean, if Dobbs sees there's no safety kind of lurking over there and Rondell's one-on-one, I would try to push the ball deep down to Rondell, let him go get it. I mean, the speed we've seen with the ball in his hands is incredible, let alone with him running a route against a corner who's probably not as quick as him. But I mean, I only cover the game. I don't coach it. Certainly, that sounds really nice on paper, and I'm sure they thought about it in Drew Petzing's meetings. But I mean, that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, I'm not saying he's Tyreek Hill, but maybe if you try that a couple of times, like you said, we've seen that every single time he's actually been utilized. I'm not gonna say every single, but frequently when he's used downfield, even in the Cliff era, he would always seem to make plays. I
And
think specifically we remember that one Minnesota game where Kyler had to scramble out and Rondale was wide open. There wasn't a single defender within 20 yards of him. He hit him on the dot and he was just able to scamper in the end zone. that's the kind of Rondale that we want to see because everybody, I feel like, knows how talented he is and the ability he has to be a game changer, a burner, but just need to put it together.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought that up too, because maybe that does change whenever Kyler is fully back in the offense, right? Because like Dobbs isn't really notorious for taking shots deep downfield. He's definitely kind of carved himself out as more of like a game manager kind of role. Kyler can throw the ball downfield. Granted, his deep ball accuracy hasn't exactly been where it should be the last couple years. But I mean, that could be for numerous reasons. But case in point, Kyler has a cannon and Kyler can definitely push the ball downfield. So when you do get a guy like Groundell, maybe Petzing will open up the offense for him. But I mean, just kind of like reeling this conversation back to Seattle, I don't see a bunch of chunk plays happening against the Seahawks defense. I think, like you said, if they're going to win, it's going to have to be methodical with 10, 12 play drives. It's not exactly Arizona's forte to this point. What really worries me is the second half because the Cardinals have not been able to exactly do damage in the second half of games. I'm not sure if that's the lack of adjustments at halftime. I'm not sure if that's just better adjustments made by the other side, but the Cardinals are notorious for slacking off in the third and fourth quarter. Seattle's a very, very well coached team, Kevin. I'm not crazy confident in Arizona's ability to maybe go blow for blow with Geno Smith on the other side of the ball.
Yeah, right now, I'm kind of at the point where I feel like it's a 30-70 kind of proposition because, like you said previously, it's a division game. There's a lot of unpredictable things that can happen, especially in rivalry division games. I feel like it could be, I think, honestly, alluding back to what I said earlier, that I see it being more of like a 24-17, 24-20 kind of battle where I feel like the Cardinals will be in it, but they'll always be behind. So it's not really a toss-up game.
Yeah.
They're kind of always playing catch up, and the score looks close, and the game was fairly close, but it was controlled by Seattle. If that makes any sense now,
Well, let me ask you this: if the Cardinals win, it will be because blank.
that's tough. I'm gonna say it's because Josh Dobbs. I think that he's had a rough last couple of weeks, and people believe that he's reverting more to what was expected, more to the mean in the last couple of weeks, and that's what he really is. I think that he's coming into this game with a huge chip on his shoulder. I think that Petzing has an opportunity to drop a great game plan, and I think that Dobbs utilizes his combination of athleticism, strength, grit, running the ball, and his accuracy, uh, short game attack, throwing the ball, that he could lead a big win.
Yeah, I don't think it's far beyond Josh Dobbs to pull a win out of that hat at all. I mean, we're talking about a guy who has basically been facing adversity since he's arrived in the NFL back in 2017. So this really is nothing new for him. And I really liked it earlier in the week too, because Jonathan Gannon was asked about Dobbs, bouncing back against the Seahawks, and Gannon used the term "he will." Like, I'm excited to see him bounce back against the Seahawks. So they're pretty confident they can get a game plan rolling. Would not shock me at all if the Cardinals go into Seattle and get a win. They've played very, very tough, despite their 1-6 record. Sorry, 1-5 through 6 weeks of football. But if we're going game predictions right now, I do have the Seahawks winning. And I know the 12th man isn't exactly what it used to be a few years ago, but the Seahawks are still a pretty talented team. If I'm a betting man, I'm probably going like I'll go 23. I'll go 23-17.
That's about where I had it too. I also wanted to bring up that Dobbs outplayed Dak just 3 weeks ago. I know we like beating up on Dallas a lot on this pod, but Dak is still considered top 10 quarterback by a lot of people in the league. And for Dobbs to go in there and thoroughly outplay him, that's impressive. He's really flashed the ability, and I do feel confident that he bounces back this week, at least to an extent. I'm not expecting him to look like Tua Tagovailoa out there, but If he
Hey,
can get
shout
the
out for
job
you for
done,
dropping the whole last name. That's impressive.
I mean, I love Tua, so he's so fun to watch.
All right, so I have 23 to I think 17 or 16. I forgot what I said. Give me your final score.
I'm gonna say 24-20.
24-20. I think either way, we both see it as a close game. I don't think if any team wins, that they're going to run away with it. Like you said, I would be kind of shocked if it ends up being like more than a 30 burger for each side because granted, I know I've kind of hounded on the Cardinals defense for the last 30 minutes, but they are playing well with what they have. And, Gannon and Rallis are certainly doing what they can with the talent assembled on the team. But Seahawks, Cardinals, 1:05 p.m. Arizona time on Sunday. You can catch all of our coverage at allcardinals.com or sl.com/NFL/Cardinals. Follow Kevin on the app formerly known as Twitter at KHicks_21. Follow me at Donnie Druid. Kevin, it's been real. It's been a lot of things. We'll see the good people later.